Viktor Gyökeres versus Liam Delap. That is the decision a lot of clubs are trying to make internally right now, as the striker market looks like it's going to be red hot this summer. And while Viktor Gyökeres is seen as the top prize, the gap between them may not be as big as most people think, and depending on the prices, you can make a pretty strong argument that Liam Delap is the better buy. We're going to break down why that is next, here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub. So let's be clear right out of the gate. Right now and for next year, Viktor Gyökeres is the better player. I want to make that very clear. I am not saying that Liam Delap is a better player for next year than Viktor Gyökeres. Gyökeres is older, he's more developed, he's more proven, albeit on a lower level, but he is the better player right now and probably will be into next year. But I do not believe the gap is nearly as wide as most fans seem to have it made out to be. The general consensus is that Viktor Gyökeres is the main prize, assuming that Alexander Isak's not available, and that Liam Delap would be this, massively disappointing consolation prize. And I do believe that there is an anti-English striker bias by England's own fans in this regard, and that if his name was, a little more Spanish, and he was coming from a La Liga team, that he would be much more highly regarded. But because he is a big English striker, he's being almost discounted in the public eye, and I don't think it's fair. I believe what he has accomplished this year with Ipswich has been absolutely phenomenal, given the surroundings and the lack of help and support that he has around him. So I'm going to break it down here in this video, discussing sort of the different characteristics of Gyökeres versus Delap, and where they are similar, where they have some differences, where Gyökeres is better, and why the stats can be very misleading when you're trying to tell the tale of these two players. So we're going to get into all that in just a second, but before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get down in the comments section. What do you think? Would you take Delap on your team if you can't get Gyökeres? What do you want for your club? Get in that comment section. Let me know your thoughts. You can also leave some comments on Twitter and Blue Sky at Pitchside Pub, and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. So let's start with the tail of the tape. These guys are pretty similar in terms of size and stature and physical ability. Both are 6'1". Gyökeres is listed as about a half-inch taller and maybe about 7 pounds heavier, but they're both pretty big, solid, sturdy guys who fit a similar profile physically. Neither are top-end burner speedster types. They are obviously have enough pace to be strikers, but they are not the Erling Haaland level of top striker, and they're not as fast as the premium defenders, the Mickey Van de Vens in the Premier League. So, burning past defenders on long balls is not necessarily their game, although both have shown a really strong ability to fight with their physicality for those over-the-top long balls and battle defenders with contact rather than just pure speed. So they do have the similarities in that regard. Age is a big part of this discussion. It's something we have to discuss here. Liam Delap just turned 22. He has played most of this Premier League season at 21, whereas Viktor Gyökeres turns 27 this June. He will be 27 for all of next season. That's a massive 5-year gap. Now, for a club that is looking to make immediate impact, Gyökeres is probably the better buy right now. Again, we don't know what he's going to do at the higher level. He has never had this massive success that he's having in Portugal at some of the highest levels, whereas Liam Delap is coming off of a very good season, respective of where his team is in the table in the Premier League at a young age. So we have to put some weight in those things. But Gyökeres is generally considered to be a more polished, finished product. You are getting what you're going to get. He's not going to get any better than he is right now. And so you should, in theory, be able to just slot him in and expect your 20 goals. And if you are a club like Arsenal or Liverpool who's looking for somebody like that, or even maybe a Newcastle if Alexander Isak does move on, he is more of the sure thing for next season. And that is a part of this discussion, is which clubs should be planning just for next season versus which ones should be planning long term. And if you are a club like Manchester United, who has to be a big part of this discussion, both because of Gyökeres' connection to Ruben Amorim at Sporting, and their need for a striker and any goal scoring ability, because their offense has been an absolute disaster. They've been linked to Gyökeres, they've been linked to Liam Delap, and their fan base, Manchester United, your fans are the ones who seem preemptively, phenomenally disappointed with Liam Delap, and he's not even on your club yet. So that's what I'm trying to dispel today, is that preemptive disappointment, because I don't believe the gap is that big. And a club like Manchester United, who certainly isn't competing this year, may not have the resources to come in and compete next year. And if they do, they might need to spread some of their money, what little money they have to spend. If they can off-put and sell some guys and have some money to work with, they have more than just one hole. Manchester United is not one striker away from being good. So in their case, somebody like Delap at a lower price point may be a better option than Gyökeres, just simply because of the fit and the timeline. So these are all factors that have to come into play, and that's why Delap may be a better choice for some clubs than Gyökeres, whereas Gyökeres might be a much better choice than Delap for other clubs. It all depends on your budget and your timeline and when you are ready to compete. The budget does matter here, and we don't know the exact numbers, but we have some information. It is reported that Liam Delap has a £40 million release clause with Ipswich, assuming they get relegated, which it looks like they are now going to have happen. That's about 46 million euros, whereas Gyökeres reportedly has a release clause somewhere in the 80 million euro range, but there have been rumors of a deal with Arsenal in the 55 to 60 range. There's been talks of it reaching 70. These are massive differences. If we're talking about Delap for 46 million euros versus Gyökeres for 55, well, that's really a no-brainer. If there's only a 10 to 12 million euro difference in between the two prices, yeah, Gyökeres is probably the guy, unless you really don't think you're going to be able to compete in the next 2 or 3 years towards the end of his prime. Whereas if it's 46 for Delap and it's 80 for Gyökeres, now we're talking about another 1 or 2 impact players you could purchase with that difference in money. So if you are a club like Manchester United and you may only have 75 million to spend on the transfer market in total, you shouldn't be wasting that on a player like Gyökeres, who's not going to make you enough better to compete with all the other holes that you have. You need to spread that out to Delap, another midfielder, another wingback, something like that. So again, it really comes down to what the prices end up being. But what I'm going to argue here in a second is that if the price point is significantly lower, it would be much larger. The gap between the prices would be much larger than the talent levels. And we can break that down with the stats in a lot of different ways. So we got to look at some of the numbers with these two players. And this is where Gyökeres' production really stands out. The non-penalty goals per 90 minutes are significantly better for a player like Gyökeres. His non-penalty XG per 90 is almost double. Another shot per game. It really stands out how much more production Gyökeres has had with Sporting than Liam Delap has had with Ipswich. But Sporting is one of the heavyweights of the Portuguese league. They constantly have the ball. We're going to get to that in a second because that's a really important detail. He is playing against inferior talent. The Portuguese league is very good, but it is not the Premier League. And he is playing against inferior talent on a team that has more talent than most of his opponents. You absolutely cannot say that again, about Liam Delap. He is playing against the best competition in the world on one of the worst teams. They are constantly outmatched, outmanned. They have less talent than the other club on the pitch, and he doesn't have a lot of talent around him. He is the shining star on an otherwise championship-level team. This is a club that was in League One and got quickly promoted to the Premier League and really has not had time to build up that level of talent. They are a championship-level squad. I don't think there's any question about that, and they're getting relegated as such. But Liam Delap, where would they be without him, honestly? He has single-handedly kept them afloat, but he has had no help to do that. Look at some of these additional stats. Progressive passes received by the two players. Viktor Gyökeres is getting 9.4 progressive passes sent his way per 90 minutes, whereas Liam Delap is only getting 3.8. That is the service. That is what he's getting from his teammates. So Liam Delap has had to manage a lot of his own goal creation. He has had to do it through progressive carries, through his own dribbles, longer shots. Some of the highlights from Liam Delap are showing shots from way outside the box. That's what he's had to do because he's not getting nearly the level of service that Viktor Gyökeres is, from his teammates, because his teammates just simply aren't very good. That has to be a factor, and that's why we can't just look at the simple goal production at the end of a season. But when breaking down these numbers, what jumped out at me was the difference, the gap between the amount of possession that Sporting has had this year and Ipswich has had. Viktor Gyökeres and his teammates have had the ball 48% more of the time than Liam Delap and Ipswich. Sporting has had 61.3% possession in Portuguese league play this year, whereas Ipswich is at 41.4%. That is 48% more of the time with the ball that Gyökeres and his teammates have had than Delap. So if you take all of these stats, and it doesn't necessarily work this way, but it does give us a really solid basis for some of these counting stats. If you increase Delap's by 48%, all of a sudden we see a significant change. All of a sudden, those non-penalty goals are just about even. So is the non-penalty XG. The amount of shots actually goes in Liam Delap's favor. So does the non-penalty XG per shot. In fact, the only stat where they're not relatively even when you account for the differential in possession is the progressive passes received, because with all the possession in the world, Liam Delap's teammates still aren't any good, so he's still not getting the service. But that actually makes the rest of these numbers look better. These goal-creating actions, these shots, these goals are on par with Gyökeres despite not receiving any service from his teammates, despite constantly playing against better competition than Gyökeres is playing, and better competition than his own team. So that makes what Liam Delap is doing here just even that much more impressive. And you have to adjust for level of competition, for playing time, for every one of these factors when you look at these stats. So it is not nearly as simple as just, well, he scored more goals than him, and thus he's the better player. So it really is interesting to see what Delap could do on a good team with service as he enters his prime. The other thing we've got to remember here is Liam Delap's 21, whereas Viktor Gyökeres is in his prime. If he's not dominating the Portuguese league in his prime, then he doesn't even belong in the Premier League, whereas Liam Delap is playing on a team that genuinely doesn't belong in the Premier League, and he's single-handedly keeping them afloat. So I think that really has to be factored in here when you're talking about these two players and whether they are, who is the better option for your club. Now, again, we got to get back into price. If the price is the same and my team is within a year of competing, yeah, I probably still want Viktor Gyökeres. I don't think that's a stretch. But for a team like Manchester United, and that's who this has to be, who has to be brought in here, and it's important to note that Delap and Gyökeres, look at these profiles. These are pretty similar type players. They do a lot of the same things. They battle for the ball. They are good, strong finishers. They're good at carrying, the progressive carries. They're not afraid to come deep and be a part of the build-up. And that fits into Amorim's system. So when you're looking, one of the big arguments for Gyökeres for Manchester United is, well, we know what he can do in Ruben Amorim's system. Well, if you can't have him, look at another guy who fits a very similar profile that you may be able to have for 50 cents on the dollar, who clearly will be able to do a lot of the same things. So, it doesn't have to just be Manchester United. Again, if Arsenal can't get Gyökeres, Delap would be a great fit for them. If Newcastle loses Alexander Isak, Delap would be a great replacement, so would Gyökeres, but they're ready to compete now, so maybe they go for the more proven entity. But somebody like Manchester United, who is not one player away and is not ready to compete, I actually believe they would be better served with Liam Delap at 40 than Viktor Gyökeres at 75. If the price for Gyökeres comes down to maybe anything below 60, and again, we don't know what Manchester United's budget is going to be, so that really is a factor here, and that makes it hard to decide what the price would have to come down to. But let's say they've got maybe 75 million to 100 million to work with. Rather than waste that all on Gyökeres and not be able to improve the rest of the squad, which badly needs upgrading as well, I'd rather have Delap at 40. I would only go for Gyökeres if I could get him under about 60. And the difference was only maybe 10, 15 million euros. Otherwise, I think if I'm Manchester United, I'd rather have Liam Delap and then save that money for reinforcing the rest of the roster around him and actually giving my striker service, because Viktor Gyökeres right now is not going to get anywhere near the service with Manchester United that he's getting at Sporting, and Liam Delap at least has shown an ability to score in the Premier League without any help. What do you think? Is the gap that big? Does this help, bring it into context a little bit? At what price would you rather have what player? What are the prices? What do the different prices have to be for you to want one or the other? Get down in the comment section. Let me know all your thoughts. You can also leave comments on Twitter and Blue Sky at Pitchside Pub. While you're at it, hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel and check out the website, pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub.